Welcome to the award-winning Women in Healthcare Leadership podcast series brought to you by Medscape Education. Our mission is to educate, advocate, and inspire women in healthcare to lift as they rise. Each episode brings you voices of leaders who are breaking barriers and leading the way in advancing women's health. Join our global community of listeners as we hear from her. Ready to be part of the movement? Let's dive in. Welcome to the show. My name is Stacy, the Vice President of Learning and Development at Medscape Education. In this episode, we are sitting down with two inspiring nurse practitioners. Laura Demuth, a nurse practitioner and Senior Vice President at Curology, and Jackie Gianelli, a menopause expert and Clinical Director of the Carolyn Rowan Center for Women's Health and Wellness at Mount Sinai. Over the course of our conversation, we are going to learn how these working moms and passionate advocates are shaping the future of women's health and leadership, proving that a career can serve both ambition and impact. So, Jackie and Laura, I want to welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you,
Thank you
Stacey.
for having us.
Yeah. To start things off, I want to talk about your paths to purpose. I know both of you share journeys in how you've gotten where you want. I want to start with you, Jackie. You're leading an incredible center at Mount Sinai. Can you tell us a little bit about the Carolyn Rowan Center and what makes it different from other women's health centers?
Sure. So the Carolyn Rowan Center, it was brought forth to Mount Sinai by a generous philanthropic donation from a woman who's very passionate about bringing a new care model to women's health, particularly midlife women's health, which is my area of expertise. And this opportunity came about just through some of the physicians that I have gotten to work with over the years. But one of our kind of clinical strategy initiatives that we are bringing in our pre-formation, structural meetings with the Carolyn Rowan Center is this idea of more of a longitudinal care model within a hospital health system, which is actually quite unusual. I think most of us are, you think about you go to your doctor for these one-off visits or something annual, preventive care that's sort of scheduled. And women's health, particularly midlife women's health, really lends itself well to more of a longitudinal care model, meaning that this is sort of kind of how I think, Laura, you'll relate to this too, but more how we think about OB care, right? You start, there's a defined period of time, it's 9 months, you have benchmarks, you know when you're going to show up, and everyone's on this kind of clear path together to get baby, and everyone goes home happy with their new child. And in some ways, the process of moving through the menopause transition is not unlike that, right? We're actually moving from one portal of life to another. So I've done a lot of that work through my experience as a founding clinician for a digital health company called Electra Health. I've done some of that work through some of my other, roles as the director of women's sexual health at Anna Barbieri MD. And we have sort of thought about it very deeply and thought, well, this shouldn't be something that is gate kept to small clinical practices. This should be something that we are able to roll out more globally to the New York City community. And the Carolyn Rowan Center has been a vehicle to do that. So it's been really exciting. And we're just getting started.
I love that. So, Laura, I know Curology has helped millions of people access personalized skincare. What drew you into leadership there, and how does your work connect to your passion for helping women?
Yeah, absolutely. I joined Curology over 10 years ago. So I call myself a little bit of a digital health dinosaur, and then I hung up my lab coat, my stethoscope, and my scrubs long before the pandemic. And when I told my family, my colleagues, my friends, I'm going to go work basically in an office that looks like Silicon Valley where we have snacks and a keg in the corner and all these things, and also treat patients. People were like, "Are you crazy?" And I said, "No, I think this is the future. I think this is how we're going to be able to access care in these new and different ways." I was drawn so deeply to the founding dermatologist, Dr. Nancy Satter and Dr. David Lorcher, who I had the privilege of working underneath for the first 8 years that I worked here. And their founding mission of Curology was making effective skincare accessible, born out of their experiences of having patients travel. A lot of women traveling from, 5 hours away, 4 hours away to have 5 minutes with a dermatologist only to get to the pharmacy and not be able to afford very simple medications. And so they thought there has to be a way that this can be better. And a lot of those women also were moms and they were taking time off of work and they were driving teenagers into dermatologist's office again to have the same experience. And so Curology really revolutionizes that, and so I was really drawn there. And anyone who's worked in an early stage startup, Jackie, I know you know this well, you wear all the hats. Your job description is not your job description. So although I was a clinician on paper, very early on, I leaned heavily into operations, into leadership, into people management, into scaling. And so I scaled our clinical team from 3 of us up to 150 and more nationwide, and then quickly also was tapped to do other things. I was really fortunate to have leaders and a board who said clinicians can do things that are outside of their traditional scope on paper. And so I took on medical licensing and said, okay, I can also help figure out the landscape regulatory wise and how we deliver care in all 50 states plus DC. After that was customer success, our other patient facing organization, talking to patients day in and day out and really delivering that exceptional end to end care. And then most recently, and probably one of my most favorite pieces that I've been adding to my purview is managing our people and culture, our human resources team. And so really blending that care of our people internally and the care of our patients together. And so that really drives me. The same reason I walked in the door 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, is really the same reason I walk back in the door today. And it's the care that we provide across all the lifespan. So we treat ages 13 on up, no upper limit. And so we really aim to um, take primarily women. We have a large female patient population, and deal with their acne and start young if they're dealing with those flares. And then I'm a firm believer that everyone should be on some form of a topical retinoid unless they have any kind of strong contraindications to that, pregnancy, breastfeeding, etc. It's only going to make your skin better over time. And so we aim to graduate people through the lifespan. And one of the things I learned very early on in my role here was just how deeply psychological the skin conditions were and the confidence that was tied primarily to women and to teen girls of to how their skin looks. And so that was so rewarding to be able to see smiles that just get bigger over time, and also expand our care as the years went on to serve women in different life stages, whether that's the childbearing years where you really have to tweak the care, up through we have a secondary brand agency where we have a lot of perimenopausal and postmenopausal women who also gravitate towards. So I've been really fortunate to be able to serve women in a different way through dermatology.
Now, you mentioned about wearing a lot of different hats. I'm curious if that surprised you, and we can, I'll start with you, Laura, first, and then we'll go to Jackie, about what surprised you the most about the career path you've chosen, especially given that you're a nurse practitioner.
It's such a great question. It's one I think about a lot. Started as a bedside nurse for a number of years and quickly learned during that experience that bedside nursing and the 3 to 11s were not for me. So that's what inspired me to get my advanced practice degree as a nurse practitioner, thinking, oh, you know what? I'll just go to Monday through Friday primary care. Everything will be fine. All my problems will be solved. Nope. Same, but different problems. And so that was right around that time that I knew that I was destined for something that wasn't traditional, that there had to be a different path, that I could use my clinical brain, I could use my leadership skills in different ways. And so could I have predicted exactly where I am, today at this moment? Absolutely not. But when I look back, the shoe fits from a very early time in my career. So I'm so grateful to be where I am today.
And Jackie, anything surprise you about the journey that you've been on?
Just how I think, sometimes you go into nursing and medical disciplines in general are all very like linear, and that's probably what we like about it in the beginning is that it's a very clear path. Like you do this and then you get that, and then you move here and you move there. And then you kind of get to a point as a nurse practitioner, as a nurse, where you've kind of like almost reached the like quote unquote end. And that didn't like kind of wasn't acceptable to me on some level. I was like, I need to keep challenging myself. I need to keep thinking differently about how care can be delivered. One of the ways that I've been able to be flexible around that care has been by getting a licensure and a board certification as a family nurse practitioner. And I think back, in the beginning, I was really into pediatrics. I was a peds cardiac ICU nurse for a really long time, actually. And when I was going back to become a nurse practitioner, I was like, well, of course I'm going to become a pediatric NP. Like, why would I not do that? And a very smart colleague have said, no, don't do that. Be a family NP. That way you can mold your career into any, aspect of care you want. And I paused and I changed my course. And I really actually owe a lot of my career to that advice, because I don't think I would have been able to pivot into midlife women's health, to kind of think, to think more creatively about how I could work in digital health. It's allowed me to take care of men as well as women. So I really appreciated that. And yeah, my career has been anything but linear.
Mhm. For sure. So let's shift gears and talk about designing care for women by women. And Jackie, I'm going to stick with you. Why is integrative whole person care, especially around sexual health and menopause, so urgently needed right now?
My goodness, so many reasons why that's true. We are, women in particular, are touched in every organ system in our body by an estrogen receptor, right? It's not just bikini medicine, which would, like, we classically think about women's health, ovaries, breasts, uterus, right? That's like women's health, quote unquote. The reality is that women's health is mental health, women's health is cardiometabolic health, and we are not small men. And so when we chop up women into like systems, like our conventional care system tends to do, and then you go see your doctor, your orthopedic surgeon is perhaps not thinking so much about your perimenopause experience when you go to that person for your knee pain, right, as they would when you have somebody who can sort of zoom out on what is a very profound hormonal health transition for a woman, and see it more holistically as a whole body experience. And then the dots, become connected. And so historically, because menopause for 20 years after the Women's Health Initiative study came out was essentially removed from medical school and nursing school, and pretty much from our cultural experience. We didn't talk about it. We didn't learn about it in school. It was taboo, to even bring it up anywhere. And so not only, we stopped making medications for it. There was no investment in the space. And it, for 2 decades, just completely vanished, which is wild to say, that it's almost like women just stopped existing after they delivered babies. It like didn't matter anymore that they had the proper health care. And so it like, luckily we've moved past that. We've re-examined the Women's Health Initiative study. We know now, how important it is to treat women, differently from a primary care perspective, especially, when you're 45 plus and in your post reproductive years. And that field of medicine is having a bit of a renaissance and a resurgence, and very much a topic of interest, that I am talking about a lot. So.
Now, Laura, Curology is 75% female with 50% women on the executive team. What does it mean to lead an organization that's not just serving women, but is being shaped by them too?
I love that question. It's one of the deepest joys of my professional life is being able to shout that from the rooftops that we're walking the walk and talking the talk at the same time when it comes to women, both in places of employment, but also in places of care and medicine as well. Um, Fortunate to, as I mentioned, the two founders of the company, one of which was a very strong female, is still a big role model for us at the company, and then followed by 2 very strong female CEOs. So even the top spot at Curology is taken up by a female, which is, I think, incredible. And I think that it really shapes our product innovation, it shapes our care model, it shapes how we deliver, how we talk to patients. I think it shows up as empathy even more so because we have that bone in our body here at Curology to come as we are, to accept people as they are and where they are in their skin journey. It really helps us to understand because 'cause we're the consumer. We have women who are Gen Z in our company, all the way up to women who are boomers, and so we are able to pick upon them. They're so passionate about our products and our care, and so we're also able to use that as, research for what we do next. What do we launch next? What do women care about? And so we're really able to keep that at the forefront. And then zooming out of, the company lens in terms of business and patient facing, employee facing and employee experience, it's incredibly important as well. We have a very strong women's ERG or employee resource group within the organization that I'm proud to share. Women flock to that. And then we offer some really exciting offerings. Separate, but certainly not, unrelated is our parenting ERG as well. We have a lot of parents. And so we're also creating, cultivating a workplace where it's okay to parent out loud. It's okay to block your calendar if you've got to pick up your kid from school. We all love the flexibility of that work. And so being able to, as senior leaders, as women, all of us are mothers. And so we're able to deliver that type of leading by example as well. So I'm incredibly proud of the statistics we have as far as female representation at Curology.
You're both working to close real care gaps that affect women every day. Why do you think it's taken us so long for healthcare to evolve in these areas? Jackie, do you want to start?
Certainly. I mean, how much time do you have?
Seriously.
I know. So many reasons. Lack of investment being one. That is historically how we have to start with the research, right? And then that informs policy and that informs the businesses around it. And so if we don't study it, we can't treat it. We can't, create careers around it. And so it has trickle down effect. So historically, menopause has been underfunded. So are areas of women's health like PCOS and endometriosis, conditions that we fully, unfortunately, don't understand the pathophysiology of, which is crazy to say considering how many women are impacted by endometriosis, PCOS, and every person with ovaries who lives long enough will go through menopause. So this is not a small niche group of people, which is funny. It was when we first started in the menopause, with venture capital, and we were talking, the early investments at Electra Health, and it was very much just like, well, how, this is niche, no one's talking. It just was. It went from being this very small topic to now this like, this whole conversation affecting a large part of America. So clearly not niche. I would say investment is one, certainly more research as well. We have to study this stuff. And the reimbursement models in menopause are a big problem. Insurance really reimburses so poorly for menopause care that there aren't even that many codes that represent the actual care that's being delivered. And so unfortunately, OBGYNs, where we think about as the first sort of stop for women seeking menopause care, they go to their trusted OB who delivered their kids, they like have that relationship. And then it's almost like you're gasping, like, oh my gosh, this person doesn't, it's like they don't even know me, And the truth is that they didn't receive any education. And even if they did, they don't have the time because they have RVUs that they have to make. And they are incentivized heavily to be delivering babies and doing procedures. So it really, marginalizes this type of care substantially to the point where, there's small margins at hospital settings, and they really cannot afford to be spending the amount of time it takes to properly address a woman's perimenopausal concerns, in the time that's allotted based on what is being paid. So it's really no one's fault. Like it feels like a slap in the face from your OB, but the truth is that there's so many systemic barriers in the way of getting good care, which is why companies like Electra Health, MIDI Health, Alloy, a lot of the other numerous midlife and women's health companies that have popped up in the past few years are trying to fill this gap. And I think something like the Rowan Center is trying to do the same. I see a lot of innovation locally in communities, in private practices, that nurse practitioners are individually passionate about bringing this kind of evidence-based but like highly personalized care to people in their own community. So I love to see that. So we're evolving past this, but it takes a long time. It takes a long time to change that pattern of behavior, and women still feel like they waste a lot of time, I think, understanding what perimenopause is and then trying to see their usual providers not getting what they need and kind of left feeling gaslit. And sometimes they stop there and they don't persist or try again. And so unfortunately, sometimes there's this long delay in care. So we're still working through that. But I think that, women are demanding better, and that is driving a lot of the attention to this space. So excited to see it.
Yeah. And Laura, anything in the dermatology space to add to what Jackie shared?
Yeah, I mean, over here for those who are listening and not watching, I am nodding along at everything that Jackie is saying because there's so many parallels between women's health and dermatology specifically too. I go back, Jackie, to something you said on bikini medicine. Like we care about a few different things and that's it. We don't care about the whole person, and that women's health in some cases is called niche. I think you could think about dermatology a bit in the same way. Many people think of it as like an ancillary or a cosmetic. Um, Specialty in medicine, and in many cases, it can be. Jackie's in NYC, I'm in San Diego. We live in areas where there are more dermatologists per capita, than there are in many places in the US. And so companies like Curology are really on that mission to make effective skincare accessible to all, which means that we want to get into the places and serve the women and the men and the teenagers of all genders, that need the care that we have to provide and may not have access to a dermatologist or the means to get there or the insurance to pay for it or the copay, at the pharmacy, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of systemic and organizational pressures on people for seeking dermatology care. Either they don't know where to get it, they don't know how to pay for it, or they think they're frivolous or silly for accessing that. And we know, from our work at Curology and then all of us, on this call as women, I'm sure we have felt at a certain point in time a bit ashamed of what something may be occurring on our face, whether it's acne or whether it's wrinkles or dark spots, things like that that are very on the surface are simple. That companies like Curology, with the providers we have and the products we have, can treat those really easily and well from the comfort of everyone's home. And I'll also just venture to break this out a little bit into mainstream society in and of itself as to why this has happened, particularly to women. I think we've again gotten better in recent years, but that beauty standard is just so strong in everyone's minds. You must look like this. And that's what's really driven the injectable market, the aesthetic market, which again, I love. I have many colleagues that do that. I think it really has a place for women to feel confident. They should feel empowered to do whatever they want to do to help them get there. Not everyone has the means to do that, and not everyone wants to pursue that avenue. So, again, getting topical treatments and the care that they can take from behind their closed front door or their closed office door or their closed bedroom door really helps to, take the white coat off a little bit. It's just person to person talking about what matters to you with your skin and how we can make it better. So I think there's just quite a few things and a lot of parallels between women's health traditionally and also dermatology in areas where women have not sought the care that they deserve and that they need because of various things that are occurring, whether it's in their communities or in our nation at large.
Yeah, I would add to that too, Laura, that just very quickly that, we have like very instant gratification, shopping online now, right? Like Instagram, the algorithm's going to get you. And so the supplement companies are very, very good at marketing to you. And so there's a lot of product marketing, consumer product good. That is where women usually start. And because it's easy, it's accessible from your phone in your bedroom at 3 a.m. when you wake up with like a night sweat. Like you're picking your phone up and you are miserable in that moment. And that supplement company knows exactly what you want. So there's a lot of time and money, to be perfectly honest, that is invested upfront in that sort of thing that deters women from often getting the real care they need.
Wow. So you both have shared your journey as nurse practitioners, but I'm curious, at what point did each of you realize you wanted something beyond the traditional nurse practitioner role? Laura, do you want to start?
Sure, I'm happy to. I think for me, I shared a little bit about my journey from bedside nurse to where I am now, and certainly loving where I am and not looking to go back into bedside nursing probably ever, although I had so much heart for it. The women that I learned from, particularly the women I learned from early in my career, I think were just absolute angels. Um, I think for me, there was a personal move I made in my life from the East Coast. I grew up in upstate New York, outside of New York City, so up in the boons of a upstate New York, where didn't have a lot of access to things outside of our community clinic and like the hospital that we had. At the capital, and life brought me to the West Coast. I'm currently in San Diego. When I got here and started thinking, what do I do with my life? What do I do with my career now that I'm on this totally different coast? I look back at that and like looking around at the landscape of medicine here in San Diego, which was so different. And I had a lot of access to different opportunities. And not that everything is perfectly carved out, because I don't think where Jackie and I are right now, it's not like it's a role posted on Indeed that you can do all these things. We've carved these out alongside others as well. But it really opened my eyes to digital health, to biotech, to pharma in a different way. And I think Jackie mentioned this as well. You go into nursing and you think, I'll be an RN one, two, maybe a supervisor, and then I'll be an MP. You're just very linear. And so around that time, my eyes just widened. And I said, wow, the world really truly is my oyster. And I can keep this niche and I can keep the skills I've gone to school for, but I can tap into both sides of my brain and be able to deliver value both to patients and also colleagues and teams in a really different way. So I'd say it's, yeah, right around that East Coast to West Coast move where I was like, yes, this is what I'm going to do.
And Jackie, how about you?
Well, ironically, I also did an East Coast to West Coast move, which I feel like is part of the pilgrimage one does when you work in digital health at some point. But prior to that, when I graduated undergrad, I was pre med, but I thought to myself, maybe I really love health communications, and maybe I should not be a doctor or a nurse. Maybe I should actually work in PR. So I graduated and worked in a tiny little New York City PR firm for a year in a very like Devil Wears Prada like style scenario. And that was very quick. I was quick to learn that that was the wrong career for me very soon. And I think it was 3 months in, and I was like nursing school applications, right? I was like back at NYU in a minute, trying to become a nurse, which I did, and then had wanted to fast track to become a nurse practitioner. I detoured a little bit in doing so because I caught wind of travel nursing, which back in, gosh, what was this, like 2005, was like a very cool, fun thing to do. You're in your 20s, right? I could do it. I didn't have kids yet. And so I really wanted to work in San Francisco. And so I made my way to Stanford, which kind of changed everything for me. I mean, I was supposed to be there 6 months. I ended up staying 8 years, getting married, having 2 kids there. And then just really getting folded into what's, on Sand Hill Road, which is all the tech companies. So I was exposed to early innovation, at Stanford, and just people who were really thinking creatively about care delivery. And that planted a seed for sure. In full transparency, I still do see patients. Like I still do have a small clinical practice because I do feel it's important for me to stay close to the consumer in that way, to really understand and be able to deliver education and coaching, or write a newsletter, do a podcast. I can't really do that effectively if I've lost touch with the person who I'm serving. And so, will I do that forever? I don't think so, but for now it still feels like an important part of how I process this, especially as menopause is evolving so rapidly. So it and I there's a part of me that just still enjoys that one-on-one care that I get to have in the settings that I currently practice in. So yes, that's kind of how I got to this point.
Very cool. So let's shift gears and talk about motherhood and leadership. And I'm curious how motherhood has shaped how you lead, whether it's with patients that you're seeing, whether it's with your teams, or just the vision you have for the future. Laura, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. Yes. I think in so many ways, I think, again, like Jackie said earlier, how much time do you have? This is the question I would say, probably like, how much time do you have? I've done a lot of thinking about this as my kids are still little, but it's been certainly a journey to get us here. I think in a few different ways. One, and a lot of the moms listening probably understand this, is efficiency. I don't have all the time in the world. In the very early startup days, I actually didn't have kids when I joined the company I'm in now. I could work from 6 a.m. to midnight, no breaks if I wanted to. And sometimes I did, because in early startup days, that is exactly what you do. And when you love the mission as much as I do, it didn't feel like work at the time. I worked with a lot of awesome people, and it just, you were grinding it without like fully understanding that. And then kids stopped me at my tracks, and I said, "Oh wow, whole new routine, a whole new everything. I have to do, I don't necessarily have to do the same amount of output, because I think we put this pressure on ourselves too as women to deliver, the exact same level that we were pre-kids. But it was important to me, as, I would consider myself like a type A perfectionist, recovering perfectionist type of person in the workplace. I really wanted to be able to deliver what I could do as my best at that time. So I had to do that more efficiently, putting boundaries in place, and being able to do more with less. And am I perfect at that all the time? Absolutely not. I'm still learning that journey myself, but definitely made me more efficient. And then maybe one of the things I'll say, and I talk about this often with one of my close girlfriends, who she will say motherhood made her more empathetic. And I'll say the provocative opposite. I think motherhood made me less empathetic, but not in a bad way. I still have that empathy bone in my body. Like that will be so core to me. It shows up on every personality test I ever take. But it helped me to really guide and channel that empathy in a way that was more productive and less, destructive, I guess, to me. I wear people's feelings. And so I would take home from my work in the hospital, all the things. I worked in hematology, oncology, it was a very tough specialty to be in. And so when I had kids, it helped me to divide the empathy plate that I had in different ways that served me, but still remain true to my empathetic core. So it just helped me become more balanced in that way from an empathy perspective. So I think those are the major things that I noticed in
And
my
Jackie,
motherhood
I saw
journey.
you nodding along the way as she was talking as well. How has motherhood shaped how you're leading?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much, that I agree with Laura there. When I started in my nursing career, I was in an ICU, so I was doing 12-hour shifts, and it's interesting. There's so many ways that the two paths have crossed, but what I loved about being a bedside nurse and a shift worker in the early days is that I had this ability to like leave my job at my job. Like I could check out of the ICU, no matter what happened or how hard it was. And it was. I mean, listen, I worked in peds cardiac ICU. On the daily, I'd walk into a code or, I've seen crazy things with kids and parents. And so there's it was a high stress job, as one could imagine. But when I left, I didn't have a patient portal to log into. I, could just and sometimes I would stack my days such that I would get, almost a week off in between. And that really allowed me to kind of like de escalate and spend time. The other thing that shift work really did for me when my kids were little is that I had to trust my partner with my kids. Like I had to hand them basically to my husband who like was not a nurse. I felt comfortable with babies. I was a peds ICU nurse. Like I could change a diaper like the best of them. But I had to just trust that my husband was going to keep my brand new baby alive. And what that did was just instill confidence in my husband that he, as a partner, was just as capable of raising kids and being the person in charge. And that happened by accident, but in hindsight, that was a gift. Now that my kids are a little bit older, obviously, I no longer work in the ICU. I had got to a point where I was like, this isn't good for my mental health to be watching children die. I need to find a different path. I ended up in women's health. My kids are tweens now, and they're to this like, establishing their authority and their independence. And so my job now is no longer really to tell them what to do, but to enable them to figure it out on their own and to let them make bad decisions and work through the repercussions of that. And that's a hard shift as a type A or somebody who's more used to being in control. And so parenting changes on you the same way that your leadership has to change, as you think about enabling the people that work alongside you to sometimes it's harder, right? To let somebody fail when you know better or to, like put the time in to like work through a problem up front when you could solve it faster because ultimately that's an investment in the organization or in your in your team and that's partly what parenting has taught me to do better.
And what advice would you give moms who are holding on to big dreams but are still carrying that weight of motherhood and wanting to do that?
I mean, I'll say that we can be more than one thing. We are mothers. We may have more than one role at one time. We may have one role at one time and then move, but transformation is always possible. That's something that the nursing career and the nursing as a field has taught me that we can be chameleons and we can morph into different things. You don't have. I could tomorrow decide I want to go, work in orthopedics, and I could go get training and do that, right? And I won't, but like I could. And so, like that curiosity, like following your curiosity, and not being afraid to challenge yourself and to fail, because you will, and the failure is part of progress. I think is a scary thing, especially the longer you've been out of the workforce or the longer you've been in a specific discipline or in a field. It's much, much harder to change. But I think as we get older, like that becomes even more important to continue to push ourselves in that way because the forces are like increasingly against you as you accumulate life experiences, trauma, debt, whatever it is that's holding you back. Like the older we get, the more into that we are. But the rewards are so much greater when you find yourself doing what you love, what you're passionate about, even if it wasn't in the roadmap.
So let's talk
Agree.
about
Plus
yeah,
one.
fabulous, Gloria. Sorry, did you want to add anything on that?
I'll add the guilt piece. Yeah, I think, I agree with everything Jackie said, and I feel a lot of that deeply. I would also say to those moms, I mean, first of all, Jackie and I and all the moms who have walked before you, wrap our arms around you and say, like, "It's okay, it's gonna be okay," and I think the guilt is something that we all grapple with, and it as mom guilt has become a buzzword and, kinda gets brushed under the rug a little bit, but truly, if you're feeling that push-pull to do something other than motherhood, lean into that. Listen to what your body is telling you, your mind is telling you. It's okay to do multiple things as long as you're not burning yourself to the ground. On the flip side, it's also okay to just to do motherhood if that's what you want for the season in your life. And so each of us is different. But if your big dreams are career and doing other things, lean into that. And if your dreams are around motherhood, lean into that as well.
You both have shared your non traditional paths as an NP, getting to where you are in your companies. I'm curious as to what skills from your clinical practice were the most transferable into your leadership role.
For me, it was calm under pressure. Being an ICU nurse for so long really taught me problem solving skills, critical thinking skills, how to not, how to pause before reacting, how to work as part of a team. In some ways, being in the ICU is a lot like being in the military, right? You're exposed to crazy things. You have to like work hard under pressure. You form incredible bonds with the people you work with. I've always loved problem solving in whatever avenue it has shown up for me in my life. And I think I don't remember if it was Reese Witherspoon or somebody said like, if you have a problem and you want a solution, ask a mother or ask a mom or ask a woman. Like, and because I that's one of the like my that's one of my best. I don't know, the things one of the best things to come out of that phase of my life is that I feel like there's no problem I can't solve. Like I'll figure it out. Like I won't stop until I figure it out. It may take me a while. I may get it wrong a couple of times, but just having that fortitude, that perseverance, and to be able to like, especially when the stakes are high, to really think creatively about how to get the outcome you need, even if it like isn't the obvious solution, is a life skill that I think will serve you in numerous ways.
And I'd add two things to that. One is on the cross-functional leadership side. I think I've still have a lot of bedside nurses in my network, and they'll be the first to say, "I'm not a leader, but I'm not a leader." And I'm like, "Well, what's your definition of a leader? You are the center of that patient for those 8 hours or 12 hours that you're there. You are managing the patient, the family, the respiratory therapist, the dietitian, the social worker, whatever is going on around that. You are the center of that ecoverse and you are making things happen around for the betterment of that patient. So any new nurse that I chat with these days, I say, think of yourself as a leader because you are, even if you're not managing people directly as a team. And that will go guide you far. You'll be able to pull on that if you do find yourself in a leadership role down the line, whether that be in traditional medicine or in something completely different. And the other thing I would say, especially more relevant to the nurse practitioner role, is diagnosing. And I always loved when I was in primary care, kind of the things that didn't make sense. And then I'd find out down the line exactly what it was if we punted to a specialist or what, or I collaborated with my supervising physician and we both couldn't figure it out. It was that camaraderie of coming together at a table. We kind of pushed clinical credentials aside and said, "Hey, let's figure this out together." And it's the same thing in digital health. Now the problems are different. The challenges are different. The things you're trying to solve, the goals of the company may be different. And in many cases, no one is dying. It's not the pediatric ICU or anything like that, but we are still solving really big, meaty problems. And we're sitting around, I like to call this like a round table, and everyone's pushing their clinical credentials or whatever MBA or something else that they have aside. And it's just people coming together on an even playing field to talk about how to improve care for women, how to improve care for patients. And so I really love that about the parallels between the traditional NP role and then also what I've experienced in digital health.
What's something you wish you could tell every NP or clinician who is feeling boxed in or burnt out?
I would say you have options. Learn about that. Jackie and I are two very good examples of that. And I'm sure both of us are willing to chat with anybody who's feeling a certain way because we have both felt that way in different parts of our careers. It's normal. Again, back to the empathy piece, I'm someone who was a sponge. I kind of soaked that up to my own detriment. And I think that that accelerated my in person nursing burnout. So you have options. You don't have to do the same thing you're doing right now for the rest of your career. And then the other thing I'd add to that is also, and I coach a lot of, or not coach, but I talk to a lot of people who will reach out to me saying, "How did you get to this place or whatnot?" And I'll say, just be selective because if you're jumping from something that you're burnt out from, it more than likely you may jump into something that will burn you out in a different way because I worked more hours, not less, when I left clinical practice and went into startup world. So just be cautious about what that next thing is and take some time to think about what you really want. Learn from other fellow NPs about their journeys and make a really good educated decision versus a rash decision.
And Jackie, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I love that, like, finding a mentor, somebody who like, look for the people who have done things that you admire. I think when nurses in particular feel burnt out, they're like, "Oh, I should go take this course or get this certification." And I think that that's sometimes a misstep because we're entering an era where it's more important actually for you to have skills than it is for you to have knowledge. Knowledge is free now. So, how do you apply that knowledge is like going to be your biggest level up. And so, figuring out what you do, what you love to do, and how to do that better and apply it in a different way that makes you extremely marketable. For me, like, I happen to also love menopause and love women's health, but no one was doing that. I mean, I was like the weirdo talking about, menopause when nobody else would listen, and people were giving me a lot of side eye for it. And I didn't care because I loved it. But also, I think that like looking for that gap in the market and filling it, especially as a nurse practitioner, is a really smart thing to think about.
So, as we're wrapping up this discussion, I want to talk about inspiration and key takeaways for our listeners. What's a mantra, a mind shift, a lesson that's carried you, each of you, through a hard time?
I'll offer you one that's definitely gotten me through, especially like the early phases of motherhood. It was a mindset shift that I was like constantly saying to myself, oh my gosh, I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to do this. I have to do it well. I had to flip that script in my head internally to be, I get to. And I sharing more of an eye towards gratitude for the things that I do get to do, versus looking at them like things on a laundry list or a grocery list that I have to get through, that I have to trudge through. So that was really it's a simple like wording choice, but I find that as the more I sat in that and lived with it and actually walked that walk, I was able to think about, wow, there are a lot of things I have here on my plate that are make it very full, but also really rewarding. And if any of those things fell off the plate right now, I would be missing something. It wouldn't my life wouldn't be as joyful as it is. So I would encourage anyone who's thinking, the same thing because I've been there. I have to do this, I have to do that is, no, you get to. And that's a great there's a choice there.
Yeah, that was a very similar answer to what I was going to say too. But I think just operating from a place of like I am capable, rather than like the like I don't want to fail. I think that clinical medicine teaches us that you can't mess up. We learn that there are high stakes when you write the wrong prescription, and so we are very careful to not fail when we're practicing clinical medicine. But once you step outside of that arena, you almost have to fail. You have to try. You have to look silly. You have to fake it till you make it, like whatever the thing is that is so counter to conventional clinical education. And so having that flexible mindset, having that can do mindset, that has been effective for me.
Now, can each of you share one resource, book, podcast, or a community that you're involved in that you would recommend to our listeners who are dreaming for more?
I will recommend a book that I just finished not too long ago. It's a fairly new book, came out in 2024. It's called Cultures of Growth by Mary C. Murphy. It's based on early research by Carol Dweck called Mindset. And so it's all about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And I think it's applicable for all of us in healthcare, but also applicable to those in other professions as well to really understand why do we gravitate towards certain things? Why do we get ourselves stuck in some of these ruts that we're in? And helps to really reframe the thinking of how you can go forward in the future and achieve more, be more, or just get more joy and fulfillment out of what you're doing. So I really loved the take that Mary C. Murphy took on mindset.
And for me, I mean, I am part of a community of nurse practitioners that is interested in starting their own clinical practice and works in women's health and honestly a lot of like just like longevity medicine and out of the box kind of clinical practice. And it's called the Advanced Practice. And there's an open Facebook group that anyone can join who's interested in entrepreneurship, and owning a business or thinking a little bit more about their own career outside of a hospital. So it's called the Advanced Practice, and there's a free Facebook group. Happy to link it in the comments.
Absolutely, we can do that. So, where can our listeners find you, if you don't mind sharing that information? How can we follow your work?
For me, it's either on Instagram or on my website, which is JackieGianelliNP.com. I have a newsletter free that I write every week, called In the Saddle on midlife women's health. Um, like Laura, I have my own podcast as well that I co-host, called the Well Kept Podcast, about like women's wellness and at large, and the and other than that, I will educate on Instagram and on LinkedIn.
Yes, and for me, LinkedIn is the best place to see and get a hold of me there. And then I also, like Jackie, have a newsletter that I run monthly, Health Tech Clinicians newsletter, where I post resources, job leads, et cetera, to help expand clinicians' thinking. So we talked a lot about people who feel stuck and don't know what to do next. It really opens the aperture for what clinicians could possibly do in the workplace. So those are the two major ones for me.
So as we close, what do you want folks to take away from this conversation? What are your parting words?
I think for me, it's just following your curiosity. If there's something nagging inside of you that's just like, there's more for me out there. I'm feeling stuck in a rut. I want to try something. I'm a little bit nervous too. Like, take that leap, follow your curiosity, and like small steps, right? Like if some of these things feel so daunting, like I don't know how I could possibly, and just sort of backing out of that into like, what is like one tiny step that I could take, not, in the next week, in the next day, in the next month, that like would put me one foot in front of the other, and then seeing how you feel after that. And then you want to keep going, you can. And if you don't, you don't, right? But we don't know until we start.
I love that so much. And plus one to all of that, I would also add, again, there are options. I know we're talking to many women on this podcast who are listening, and some of you may be nodding along, thinking, "Yes, I'm really gravitating towards what Jackie's saying about women's health, and I hear myself and I see myself in the words that she's saying." And others may also think about dermatology and how that pertains to their journey as a woman and how they feel about themselves and how they're able to carry themselves in their day to day. And some of you may be clinicians who are looking at us and saying, "Wow, there are options for me." So I think no matter if you're someone who's experiencing a health condition, women's health, dermatology, or anything related, listen to yourself. There are options for you. If something doesn't feel right, it's definitely behooves you to listen to your gut and to move out of that situation. If you hear no a first time, don't take your first no for gospel. Make sure that you keep walking down that path, because I think Jackie and I both have, have gotten to where we are now because we've been able to probably tolerate some no's and also a lot of yeses in both our own minds and the stories we tell ourselves, but also in the colleagues and those that we surround ourselves with professionally. So I'd leave your listeners with that.
Well, I want to thank both of you. This has been thoroughly enjoyable for me. Jackie, Laura, thank you. I wish you both continued success, and I hope our paths cross again soon.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you for having us.
To our listeners around the world, thanks for joining us today. Tune in as we continue our journey to amplify the voices of women leaders in healthcare. Hear From Her is brought to you by Medscape Education. Please subscribe to Hear From Her on your preferred podcast channel and follow us on LinkedIn. Until next time, remember to lift as you rise.